Hello and welcome to my screencast on tools and tool cultures. Um, this is your starter for today, so I'd like you to pause and jot down somewhere your answers to the following four questions. What are four uses of fire? Which hominin first learnt to control it? What were two cultural changes that came with the use of fire as a source of light? And what is a biological change that came with the use of fire as a way of cooking meat and root vegetables? So pause here, jot down some ideas, some bullet points, and then come back. Okay, so question number one, four uses of fire. Um, we looked at, most importantly, the use of fire in creating heat, light, being able to cook food, using it for protection, for hunting, and for art and spiritual uses. So those, I think that covers all the main uses of fire. Which hominin first learnt to control fire? That would be Homo erectus. So fire control, remember there was a number of steps that came before hominins were able to actually control fire, making it bigger and smaller and creating it from nothing, etc. So this is attributed to Erectus, and this allowed Erectus to finally disperse out of Africa into colder areas like Europe and Asia. Okay, question number three. What were two cultural changes that came with the use of fire as a source of light? So light specifically. One cultural change was that there was an increase in socialization and the sharing of ideas and things around a communal source of heat. Um, so yeah, a sense of community would have been established and built on, but also the fact that light allowed us to have longer working hours in the day, and we could use those hours for creating and manipulating tools, for hunting, for planning and socializing. So uh, lots of things there. Um, and question number four, biological changes that came from the use of fire as a way of cooking. So over time, we recognized a shortening in the gut. Um, as a result of not having to process and digest cellulose and fibrous plant material. We didn't need to hold on to it as long and process it for as long, so the gut shortened. The skull changed in a number of ways, exo and endocranially, so we got changes in the mandible, the dental arcade, the teeth, the brow ridge, sagittal crest, zygomatic arch, etc. And all of these things were able to get more gracile and smaller, which requires less energy to develop and maintain, due to the fact that cooking our food allowed us to absorb a greater net energy intake. So we had more calorific investment in the brain as a result of that, so encephalization. And this created a positive feedback loop because encephalization led to cultural changes that made it easier for us to hunt and cook our food, which again gave us a greater net energy intake, which allowed for greater encephalization, etc., etc. So all of these things happened as a result of feedback over thousands of generations. All right, moving on to today's topic, which is tools. So I know I've mentioned this before, but it's important that we remember that the name of this unit is Trends in Human Evolution. So understanding the trend in something over time rather than focusing on the facts and figures of, say, each hominin. So I want you to see how manufacture, efficiency of tools, materials, and function trended in a certain direction over time, and how these changes were attributed to one of four main tool cultures. So we're going to learn about these four tool cultures. They're called the Oldowan, Acheulean, Mousterian, and Upper Paleolithic tool cultures. Okay, I suggest you write some notes using the screencast or come back to it on the slides. But this is a massive part of this unit, and tools comes up at least, I want to guess, 60% of the time. So you might recognize this word, Paleolithic, but what does it mean when we refer to the Paleolithic period? Um, the Paleolithic period is a period of human prehistory, so our history, that is characterized by the development of tools. So when we started creating and using tools, this was the emergence of the Paleolithic period. And what do we mean by tool? A tool is any device or implement, especially one held in the hand, that is used to carry out a particular function. And we will see that we actually are not the only animals that use tools. Sorry, I keep dropping things. Many extant primates use wooden tools to undertake a lot of activities. So you can see there a baby chimp using a stick to dig in a termite mound to get some food. And we can assume that our ancestors did the same thing. But we don't see organic materials like wood preserved in the fossil record. So it's difficult to tell if they did this or not, but we would assume if chimps are doing it, that we can carry that trend back to our hominin ancestors as well. Some primates even use stone tools. However, the difference is that they haven't developed the tool themselves. They've just found it. So you can see below a monkey using a rock to smash open a piece of fruit, and the same on the right. This shows a behavioral change, but it's not technology. So technology is the application of scientific knowledge for practical purposes, or equipment that's developed from the application of scientific knowledge. So they're not using knowledge to create something that they can use in the future. They just find something and smash. So my question to you, what are some of the uses of tools do you think that hominins would have exploited stone and wood and things like that for in the past? So pause here, have a think, jot some things down. I can think of, I think, 6-ish things. So come back when you've got some ideas. All right, here's a bunch. Weapons for hunting things. Tools for digging in the soil, tools for scraping meat off bones, for fighting each other, for cutting things up, for smashing bones open. Okay, these are some ideas, but which order do you think they came in? Which one was first? Which one was last? Pause again, have a think. Okay, all of these pause and thinks are really important to see that you are identifying your misconceptions or your knowledge gaps. So it is a really good use of your time, so please do it. All right, the order that I've put them in here is that we would have started using tools to dig in the soil and maybe to cut up plant matter. Next, we would have been using tools to scrape meat off bones and smash open bones to access marrow because early on in hominin prehistory, we were butchering after scavenging carcasses that something else had already killed, not hunting immediately. So our first access to meat and marrow and things like that would have come from the idea of scavenging. So we weren't good predators just yet. We needed encephalization as a result of eating scavenged meat to come first. And lastly, we would have been using weapons to fight each other and to hunt. So that would have been the last step in tool evolution. Okie dokes. Another question. Keep pausing. The creation and manipulation of tools shows a massive leap forward in cognitive ability. So I want you to think about which area of the brain was required to develop first in order to allow hominins to produce useful tools. So which area of the brain did we need to develop before we could start making tools? What do you think? The answer is that we would have needed the ability to foresee something that didn't exist yet and then create it with intention. So this requires planning. So thinking, I would love to have a tool that would allow me to do this job. How could I make a tool like that? That requires planning, which is, a subsection of abstract thought. So thinking about something that doesn't exist. And this requires development of the frontal lobe. So tool production required us to plan and then to teach each other through imitation and language and things like that. And that's the key to human success. So building on knowledge from previous generations, developing better and better tools with a variety of uses and out of different materials, that's called cumulative cultural evolution. And it's something that we considered until very recently a unique trait of humans. So the ability to learn something from your parent and think, Yep, cool, but I can do that better, and so on and so forth. If you are interested in reading an article, you can find it in the slide version of this, so the notes of this slide here. And there's an article about how scientists have discovered this ability in pigeons too, which is kind of cool. So cumulative cultural evolution as a result of development of the frontal lobe, so behind the forehead. All right, moving on to tool cultures. This is our very first tool culture, the oldest tool culture, called Oldowan tool culture. So I need you to be writing down the yellow things, which I think are the most significant points, but you can add to that from the information on these slides. So the very first tools that hominins made were very basic. They were just made of smooth river stones. So you can imagine finding a decent sized pebble that's all nice and smooth in a river. And the creators picked stones with good flaking qualities that were the right size. So they'd pick something that looked like it could be smashed apart, that fit in the hand nicely, and that could be used with a power grip, so for bashing things open. And what they would do is use what they called a hammer stone, so a harder piece of rock, to bash into this pebble that they'd found, flaking off some pieces to create hand axes. So this is the core here, and flakes as well. This first appeared in regular use with Homo habilis, and we nickname habilis handyman, sorry about that, handyman, because he was the first hominin in the fossil record to have evidence of creating and using tools. So the core became a chopper or a hand axe that they could bash things with using a power grip, and the pieces that flaked off like this were possibly used to cut scavenged meat, so with their sharp edges rather than bash. The bashing was probably for bone material to get out the nutrient-rich marrow, which would have been our first access to really nutrient-dense animal material that, gave us a really high calorific intake. Okay, I think that's all I need you to know about the Oldowan tool culture. So it's attributed to handyman, hand axes, cores and flakes. They bashed a rock about 5 times. It was really basic technology there. Number 2, Acheulean tool culture. Acheulean, I'm not really sure where that word comes from, but this, as you can see on my very primitive timeline here, emerged about 1.8 million years ago and continued until about 120,000 years ago. So it really did persist for a long time. And the key difference between Acheulean tool culture and Oldowan tool culture was a standardized design. So it really showed that there was a method to producing these exact tools and that everyone was following the same method. What do you think that tells us about the community? So a standardized design, what does that tell us? It tells us that there was significant teaching and learning or imitation. So we've got the communication of ideas happening now, and everyone's following the same design, roughly 50 blows or so, so more effort put into manufacture, more planning required. So again, growth in that frontal lobe, development in abstract thought, with the recognition that putting in more time and effort to creating your tool would lead to a more efficient tool. So you get a greater net outcome from your tool if you invest more time in it. And that's really logical thought, again, showing development in that frontal lobe. What's interesting about this tool is that the whole surface works here. So in Oldowan tool culture, we just had one usable edge and the rest was round to be held in the hand. This has a lot of sharp edge, and that makes the tool more efficient. It would have been used for butchering games, so scavenging still, maybe butchering stuff to transport back to the community. For digging in the soil to get root vegetables and things like that. Cutting wood and plants, and maybe defense. And this, these inferences are made through archaeological evidence of surface wear and tear on the tools that they found. All right, we're out of time. So this is going to have a part two and a part three and maybe a part four. So I will see you there.